My next guest, well, he was supposed to be on the plane that crashed into the Pentagon 20 years ago. Here now is Peter Brookes, Heritage Foundation Senior Research Fellow and retired Navy commander. Peter, great to see you. Thank you for being here.
Great to see you, too.
You were you were working for the Defense Department on 9/11. Right. Describe precisely where you were at the time that the attacks began.
Well, David, but for the grace of God, walk I. About 2 weeks before I was to make my first trip as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Asia and Pacific Affairs to Asia, to East Asia, including Hawaii, Japan, and Korea, my assistant came in and offered me a couple of flights to get me to Hawaii. One was an American Airlines flight through Los Angeles, and the other was about a half hour later, a flight, as I recall it, from Dulles to San Francisco to Hawaii. I chose the later flight, the United flight, to give myself a little bit more time at home. And as I said, but for the grace of God, go I. The American Airlines flight was the one that they flew into the Pentagon that day.
Extraordinary.
We never got off the ground. We were on the taxiway. The flight was lightly few number of people on the plane. I was able to leave the airport. I got my luggage came back. I went home, wasn't able to contact anybody. And one of the things on my answering machine in the old days, the blinking red light, was to come back to the Pentagon. And I was asked to come back to the Pentagon as a senior policy official to help with the response.
What was it like, Peter, what was it like at the Pentagon on the day that the plane crashed into it? I mean, what was that like? How chaotic was it? Was it possible to get work done, et cetera?
Well, David, I got there later. Remember, it happened in the morning. I got there in the afternoon. I remember driving up the highway, which was empty, which is rare in Washington, D.C., seeing the clouds of smoke, the armed military folks in battle gear meeting me at the gate with my name, checking my name to see if I was allowed to come back into the building. The building was basically empty, a very small number of people. I remember being there for a couple of days, and I remember occasionally a security guard coming around when I was trying to get a couple of winks of sleep in my office to tell me that the fire was spreading and that to be aware because because the building was on fire for a number of days. It was very eerie. Obviously, this is a place of 25,000 people. It was empty, and of course, we were in uncharted waters. And obviously, I think a lot about that. They attacked my country. These terrorists attacked my city. They attacked my place of work, and they attacked me.
And of course, the attack was planned and orchestrated from a spot in Afghanistan controlled by the Taliban, and we're in the same situation now, Peter. Are we as vulnerable with the Taliban back in control as we were just before 9/11?
I'm worried about that. And as you know, I wrote about that this week for the Heritage Foundation. I'm concerned about it. It didn't have to be this way. What's going on in Afghanistan didn't have to be this way. We should have kept a smaller force there to give spine to the Afghan security forces, to provide intelligence, to provide air cover if necessary, to prevent Afghanistan from once again potentially becoming a safe haven for transnational terrorism. Today we're not only dealing with al-qaeda and the remnants of al-qaeda and perhaps a rejuvenated al-qaeda, but we're also dealing with ISIS. ISIS-K, right. ISIS Kordofan Province is another group that's had transnational aspirations and has also, sees us as its nemesis. So I'm really concerned about that, and I'm worried about our ability, despite how great our intelligence services are, our military is, that from afar it's going to be much more difficult to tamp down or eliminate this threat.
Well, you have a piece out today about the over-the-horizon strategy of the Biden administration, which means that, we can still kill terrorists in Afghanistan, even if we don't have forces there. By the way, Jen Psaki, that brilliant military strategist, Jen Psaki suggested that the drone strike after that suicide bombing in Afghanistan was an example of that. But she didn't mention the fact that our troops were still on the ground at the time of those drone strikes. We don't have troops on the ground. We may have some assets on the ground, some intelligence assets, but far and few between. Is that over-the-horizon strategy really feasible?
I'm really worried about this because of access. You need to have, remember, Afghanistan is a landlocked country. You need to have air access. That means you're going to have to fly over places like Central Asia or Pakistan. You're going to have their permission. In the past, we didn't have to do that because we had the ability to operate from within Afghanistan. So folks now at the Defense Department and the CIA and other intelligence agencies are going to be hustling to try to find ways to be able to affect the president's plan. Unfortunately, I think the plan is flawed, and it's going to be much more difficult to be able to deal with a growing terrorist threat out of Afghanistan. I mean, I hope it doesn't come together, but I'm worried about it. They're going to propagandize 9/11 tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I think I'm worried about the flow of foreign fighters like we saw to ISIS in Syria moving to Afghanistan to support them, to establish a caliphate or an emirate, and to export international terrorism across the globe.
Peter, finally, very quickly, you mentioned the various terror groups that are there now, and the suggestion from the administration that there may be a civil war developing between them, between ISIS-K and Taliban and al-qaeda. Don't they have more in common than they have that separates them? That is to say, the common enemy of the United States?
Yeah, that's interesting. They don't all agree. As you know, ISIS and the Taliban, ISIS and al-qaeda are not on the same page. And you know, it's like ISIS, the Haqqani network, and Taliban, al-qaeda, and the Haqqani network against ISIS. So there will be challenges there. The Taliban will have difficulty ruling the country. They will look to their terrorist allies to help them. But you're right. A civil war could prevent or limit in the short term the export of terrorism abroad.
By the way, we don't want to forget, we're happy that you didn't end up on the wrong flight, but we have to memorialize those who were on that flight, one of whom we knew here at Fox pretty well, Barbara Olson, the wife of Ted Olson, who was the Solicitor General at the time, tragically died on that flight. She was going to Los Angeles on that morning, and we mourn her loss and, of course, the loss of all those who died on that horrible day. Peter Brookes, thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you. We must never forget, David. Thank you.